The world is witnessing many different things which are not normal. But right now, what is happening in the home state of Jesus is topping them all. As we speak, in Israel, there are some occurrences that are setting the tone for the world in shock and leaving everyone surprised. What are they? And what do they mean for the future of Israel and the world? Stay glued to your screen as we explain everything you need to know about this phenomenon. Nations have different things they accord respect to. In Israel, the ancient temple where every Jew is expected to worship God holds a special place in the heart of many. If you want to win an election, you might have to mention it. While the non-orthodox might not see it as significant to that extent, they still view it as one of the significant monuments of the state of Israel. But here is the thing. The temple is not standing there now. According to what some Israeli experts are saying, the temple existed where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is currently standing until Jerusalem was conquered by foreigners, and a new structure was built in its place. In fact, as of the time speaking, Jews were not expected to be there even by Israeli legislation. The Muslim women in black have been keeping vigil in it to ward off any Jewish visitors that might want to come around the place. Talk of the best way to keep people far away from a particular place. This mentioned one is easy if you know what you're talking about. But does this temple really belong to the state of Israel? Let us start with Jerusalem itself. Who owns it? The international community does not recognize Israeli ownership of Eastern Jerusalem, yet the country is occupying it. Let us get a bit into some of the story. The Israelites were said to have conquered the land from the Jebusites, and throughout history, it has been conquered and reconquered about 44 times. Moreover, it has been besieged at least 23 times. This is the state of Jerusalem as a nation itself. Of course, such a story does not make it a significant claim that the Israelites or Palestinians own the land since this event happened more than 100 years ago. Besides, almost every land being held today is held not by the original owners, but by people who conquered it before the modern world. While the Israeli claim of Jerusalem has its far-reaching standing, in 1948, during the Arab War, Israel annexed the eastern part of Jerusalem, but it was later reconquered by Jordan. Since then, it has been regarded as part of Jordan, but not until the 1967 Six-Day War was it successfully annexed by Israel alongside other territories. Since then, Israel has been seeing Jerusalem as its territory. Today, the administrative arm of Israel is still standing in Jerusalem. As for international recognition, the international community, as we have mentioned earlier, does not see Jerusalem as that of Israel. But the truth now is whatever the international community thinks. There is no doubt that Israel controls the region. So we can say Israel is in charge of Jerusalem, but what about Temple Mount? Most Islamic scholars and experts have rejected the Israeli temple ever existed on the site of the Temple Mount. They believe that it is revered in the Quran, and it was built by one prophet called Solomon, who also doubles as a wise man. The same Solomon is also revered by the Christian Bible. As you can see, it is very hard to be used as a justification, since it is also being used by another group, and we need to know which one is right. The only thing we can get now is that Solomon built it, but more so, the Palestinians and the Jordanians don't want it to be called Temple Mount any longer. They see the name as a sign of solidarity with Israel, which should not be so to them. As reported, some researchers have been bullied out of the state just because their choice of name. The Jewish since then have responded in kind by arguing that the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque was indeed the site of the old temple. This is in fact what brought about this video, because as we will inform you shortly, there have been movements by Israel to establish the site as mainly its own. For such to happen, Israel may have to resort to violence. And who says that would be easy? This is certainly not the time to make the Middle East a war theater, but that is what we will discuss later. But before that even happens, it is important to consider a discovery made by a Jewish which can solve this problem once and for all. How Robert Hamilton solved the dispute without solving it. In 1927, an earthquake struck Jerusalem, killing 130 people. It also wounded 450 people and destroyed about 300 buildings in the process. Part of the building destroyed is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and days after, the Muslim Waqf, led by Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, began restoring the mosque. But someone saw an opportunity to do some research among the ruins. Yes, his name was Hamilton. Knowing about the issue around the mosque, he cooperated with the Waqf in charge to conduct an archaeological exploration on the site. As luck would have it, the Muslim cleric agreed, but he could even document more. He excavated and wrote about almost all the work being done by the Waqf, and he even photographed, and most of his findings were surprising. Perhaps since then, he had considered publishing a book on the situation. Since then, he has been writing his book, which is a big deal of what we are talking about here, because it contains some very important things that could end a debate on Al-Aqsa's status if humans were to always agree. Since he had already established a relationship with the Muslim clerics, Hamilton made sure that in his book he mentioned nothing that the clerics could either disprove or find inconvenient, thus becoming so biased in the process. With that, buried deep in him were some important facts that he felt would not help things then. In fact, to protect them, he hid them in the British Mandatory Archive, which is today the Antiquities Authority archives in the Rockefeller Museum. He did enough to keep them far away if you care to look at his archives. There are very good reasons for this. First was the fact that Britain was being blamed for the actual problem in the Middle East. We can see that even today, for example, in the case of Palestine, Palestinians would still not agree that it was not the British that let the Jews into their lands. So the British Authority probably saw keeping it as their responsibility. But the truth surfaced. As you can guess, the findings being kept secret are related to factual events that preceded the Muslim presence in Jerusalem. Of course, those periods are the Second Temple and Byzantine periods. The question is then, what are these findings? Many things have been discovered, but we must mention the most significant ones before moving forward. It is the discovery of a Jewish mikvah underneath the renowned Al-Aqsa Mosque. Just what is that? Wait a minute. When the temple was operating, a small river was used to purify most people. That river is what is called the Jewish mikvah. Hamilton himself probably did not expect to actually find it there, but then he was able to discover it, among many other things. We may not have a good reason to blame him for keeping it safe in the light of what happened years after. A group of Islamic clerics organized a non-formal search. They brought a bulldozer and dug a pit. This happened when they installed the Al-Mawardi Mosque at Solomon's Stable at the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount. The state comptroller condemned the activities, which they view as trying to unearth the place illegally. Many news outlets were even more than ready to call it a scandal. Rather than that being the end of it, it was the beginning. Barkai and Vera, two great archaeologists, conducted their own research too. Luckily, most of the things kept under the carpet by Hamilton resurfaced again. For example, fragments of the columns used in a hypocaust were found in the place. A hypocaust is a space under the floor of a room used to heat the room above, and hollow square bricks through which heated air passes, heating the space. It seems that Barkai and Vera knew their onions, as they were more than ready to establish that there are actually places used by the priests to heat the body after immersing people in water. This is the problem with truth, as said by one expert. It rears its ugly head repeatedly, and it seems not to have any full stop. These two scientists would lead to another development that is even more twisting. Hamilton discovered a Byzantine mosaic about half a meter under the floor of the damaged mosque. What, like Hamilton, you knew about this and you never told us? Of course, it was a photograph, not a stated discovery, because as we have mentioned, Hamilton was very discreet about revealing such truth. While Vera was checking the picture, he noted the mosaic stones and the marble used in grading churches during the Byzantine period. At that point, both Vera and their partner could do nothing but conclude that a church was standing at the Temple Mount site. According to Vera, they had a lot of data on the Byzantine period, and anybody writing the history of that time should reassess because, contrary to what is believed, there was indeed a church on the Temple Mount, and it was not desolate. It was against most things that had been said, populated by deeply religious people. Finally, that is an inscription on a Byzantine lamp referring to Jesus. This is even without mentioning the amazing result that the sifting of the earth has shown over the years. So for all the discoveries, it seems the Jews have a huge pull over the Temple Mount now. What does this translate to? Rather than the gentle and humble practice of the 1960s, the Jews have been getting more confident about the Temple Mount. And now that they have the power in Jerusalem and that they have some historical backing, things could get stronger. Moreover, if the Orthodox were to move things their way, everything could actually become much more fastened since a conservative government is the one in power. And as we mentioned earlier, an all-out war could ensue if not properly managed, because the mosque, despite all claim to the contrary, is still the third most important site for the Muslims. All hands on deck now since the last procession. A procession is expected to be done when the temple is about to be rebuilt and Jerusalem is about to receive the Messiah. Many are already wondering why such has been allowed, but there is no cause for alarm. The procession was done to show that the Jews were ready to take over the Temple Mount as and when due. Well, why it has always been a matter of choice already. But even more than that, it is also a sign of their preparation for the Messiah. According to many rabbis, this is when the Jewish Messiah should arrive. He would come at a time when there was a need to rebuild the temple. And if we want to take his words for it, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he has spoken to the Messiah and is coming very soon. Plus, why did he suddenly come back to the office? Is it not the case that he might be the one to pave the way for the Messiah? In the Jewish tradition, there will be two Messiahs. One will first come and serve as a forerunner of the second. Netanyahu, as it is being suggested, is the first. In fact, if you look at the threat he has been making to neighboring Iran, which he claimed harbors weapons of mass destruction, you will see an unusual energy of overprotectiveness and excess love for one's own country. But what is this Messiah we are talking about? The Rabbi Messiah is certainly not Jesus, because the Bible never declared that he would build a temple when he comes back. He is just coming to take the believers home. From all of the features of the Messiah being described, it is very clear that they are decrying the coming of the Antichrist. He would have a forerunner like John was to Jesus, and he would unite world religions. All of the things mentioned already. If you look at all the happenings in the world, you will see an unwavering pattern. Thank you for getting to this point. Do you think the Temple Mount belongs to Israel? Moreover, what do you see of the findings there? What is your thought about the Antichrist? Please throw us your beautiful answers in the comment section below. Thanks, and we love you so much. Remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe.